Hello everybody, and in this video today I'm going to give you the answers to chapter 1 and 2 and then also to chapter 3 and 4. Now chapter 1 was optional, lots of you chose to do it anyway, but I think most of you know that the Wright brothers are famous for being the first people to fly. We're going to find out that that's not entirely accurate. There's some specifics that made their flight special. It was on December 17th of 1903. That they had their first flight of 120 feet. That would be just over the length, if you were thinking in terms of the elementary gym, that wouldn't even be all the way down and back in the elementary gym. So it's pretty short, but it was the first flight. Why was it so special? It was the first flight of an aircraft that took off on its own power. People had flown gliders before, jumped off of cliffs and so on, as you've read in the book, but this was the first time someone had a machine that under its own power was able to get itself up in the air and stay there for 120 feet at least to start. Of the two brothers, Wilbur was the more serious of the two. Quiet, thoughtful. Orville was more outgoing. Saw the bright side of things. And both of them had amazing scientific and engineering type minds. And we're going to see that throughout the book. As we've talked about, anytime you get into science, it's a series of identifying the problem and then test. So, in the introduction, they talk about primary versus secondary sources. Primary source in history is something written or made by someone who was there. So, for example, if we want to know what happened, if there was two kids get in an argument during recess, a primary source is going to be somebody who saw the argument or one of the people in the argument. A secondary source was not there. So it would be a friend who was maybe told what happened there or something like that. Now when it comes to history, primary source material can be somebody who was at the event. In this book, they write a lot using the letters and diaries that the Wright brothers wrote. So that's why the book is called In Their Own Words. Secondary source material would be from, for example, if you open up a history book and it tells you about the Wrights' journey and what they did and all that, but they weren't actually there, that would be a secondary source. Why did the Wright family move often? The father was a bishop, and that required them to move quite a bit. The family that they grew up was unusual is that both parents had college educations. This was obviously the 1800s, so that was unusual, and especially for their mother to be highly educated as well. So they said that's part of why their house was filled with books and all sorts of other resources. What triggered the boys' interest in flying? Their father brought home a flying top of sort that when you spun it around, it spun up in the air. Their mother died of tuberculosis during this book, and we find out that Wilbur actually was hit in the head with a hockey stick as well, and that he did a lot of the caring for his mom. Tuberculosis is the type of illness that killed people slowly, and often was very painful to watch somebody go through that. And then at the end of chapter 2, we find that Orville and Wilbur worked together first in a printing business. They launched a newspaper. The newspaper ended up failing, but their printing business was successful. All right, let's go on then to chapters 3 and 4. Orville and Wilbur team up for another business venture. What do they do together? Well, the title of the chapter kind of gets gives it away. They build bicycles. This was the beginning of the bicycle rage, and because, again, they were both very skilled designers and builders of things, they built bicycles and sold them for a living. They're pretty successful at it. This chapter also talks about a guy by the name of Otto Lilienthal, who was known as the Flying Man. He flew several successful gliders, and he would often attach himself to the glider, which, if you know that, you can probably guess how he died. He died when one of his gliders crashed. Wilbur's interest really peaked at this point because peaked being he got excited about flying because they knew that Lilienthal was making these gains in how to fly, and now he was dead, and that really woke up Wilbur to say, well, maybe that's a problem we can solve as well. And tackle the problem. We know they're going to be pretty successful at that. Now in chapter 4, balance. When it comes to riding a bike or flying, balance is key. Any of you who have ridden a bike know that once you do it, it's pretty easy, but when you're figuring out that balance type, it is a little tricky. Now in this chapter, we also learn about another gentleman named Samuel Langley. He launched and piloted a model airplane with its own engine. And this was the first time Langley was the first one to get something with its own engine off the ground. So I think I might have misspoke myself when I said the Wrights were the first to do it. The Wrights were the first to do that with a person on the aircraft. Langley actually created a model airplane with its own engine and was able to fly it. He flew it for over 90 seconds, which was a very long time. And then at the end, Wilbur and Orville, they built a kite. Where they were able to twist the wings. And they were able to control it. In fact, he said he could pretty much make the kite go wherever he wanted to. So those are your answers to chapters 1 through 4.